There was one night that I was sitting in the cabin, a beaver splashed like right beside me, and I got wet because he splashed right beside the boat.
That's really close. Yeah.
Yeah, my life is complete now. I've been splashed by a beaver. That was pretty awesome.
So in today's episode, we present you Lorne Kelly, who built his own RowCruiser from Angus Boats. For some context, a RowCruiser is a little bit like a kayak. It's about 18 foot and a half. But instead of paddles, kayak paddles, you actually have a rowing seat that you use to propel the boat. And what's unique about, there's a lot of boats like that are rowers, and fast. But what's unique about the RowCruiser is there's actually sleeping arrangement. Lorne has used that to travel quite a bit. Let's get right to it. All right, thanks, Lorne. Thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure.
I came across your blog, and I was searching for, looking at RowCruiser. I'm thinking about building this. I was searching about it, and then I came across some of your posts, and then your journey, which I think is fantastic. And I thought, well, let me reach out to him to see if I can get him on the show a little bit. And I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear your stories. I think if we could start with about you. I know I've read too, you've done a lot of biking, so touring is not new to you, or cruising by bikes and so on. So what got you started with rowing and cruising, and how did you select the RowCruiser and decided to build it? I think you did it in 2 or 3 weeks. I don't remember, but it was.
Yeah, I did it pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've always been a traveler. When I was 19, I went to Europe and slept in trains and stations and toured around. And then when I was married, from the age of 20 to 40, pretty much, we averaged about 2 months a year. And now I'm 55, I average about 6 months a year. And I've always played with boats. We had a fishing boat when I was a kid, so I learned how to change a shear pin when I was like 9 years old. And then My wife and I had a canoe. We bought a $50 canoe when we were young and did Algonquin Park. We probably spent a month and a half up there over the years that we were married, and down to Everglades and a few other places too.
Wow.
But the thing that really got me interested in this idea of having a human-powered cruiser is years ago in Wooden Boat magazine, there was somebody who had built a pedal-powered houseboat and taken it down the Rio Grande.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Rio Grande. Yeah.
Really? That's
Yeah, so I wanted to do it ever since then, and I found the plans for the RowCruiser, and I thought, yeah, that'd be a good thing to do. And of course, it was COVID that really got it happening, because I was hiking in Japan at the time, and everybody got sent home, and I thought, well, what can I do while I'm sitting at home? Build a RowCruiser. So that's how that started.
Wow, that's a great project for sure. I guess the beautiful thing is I'm a sailor, so most of the time, sailing, you don't really do a lot of physical work, a little bit, but
Yeah.
The RowCruiser appeals because you're obviously keeping in shape with that, right? So during COVID, you selected the RowCruiser and built it pretty quickly, 2 to 3 weeks, as you said.
Yep.
Did you get it CNC cut, or you cut it yourself too?
No, I cut it myself.
Wow.
So doing it like that in 2 weeks is kind of insane.
That is insane.
Yeah. 2 weeks to do this shell and everything. That doesn't include putting the fittings and the painting. But I built cedar strip kayak when I was younger. I've worked with wood a lot, fiberglass quite a bit. I know how to do a Gantt chart. So
Right.
it wasn't insane, really.
Okay.
The important thing is cure time. If you're speed building, you have to be sure that anything that can be epoxied is like epoxied every day. And
Right.
then the next day you start on the next things that can be laid up.
Yeah, and temperature. I don't know. Did you do it in a garage, or because temperature is also very touchy with the epoxy, I think, right?
Yeah, I did have a temperature controlled room, so I would turn it up to, I think, 30 at night, and then turn it back down the next day when I'm working.
Well,
and also, you can't expect a nice RowCruiser if you're building it like that. The lines on my boat are completely up and down, like they're not smooth at all. And the finish
it's got some personality, right?
Yeah, it's got some personality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I follow your journeys. You started in Brockville and did the Trans-Severn, Lake Huron, and Lake Superior in one go the summer. I don't remember how many weeks. Was it 8, 12 weeks? Something like that?
It was 2 months. So yeah,
2
8
months.
weeks. That was my first trip.
So how was it? What were some of the highlights and challenges, I guess, starting from your first go at it?
It was pretty good. My whole apartment building came out to see me off when I took off, which was really nice.
Oh, nice.
My neighbors here get along really well. So from here to Trenton, it was really good anchorages. It's not too heavily populated, and there's some nice things to see. It went quite well. It was a little tough going upstream through the Thousand Islands, but not too bad. From there up to Lake Simcoe, it started to get more populated. You start getting stressed about finding anchorages, and there's no trespassing signs here and there.
Yeah, I guess on the Trans-Severn, I guess you could sleep on the boat at the locks. I guess that was the easy way out too, right? To do that.
Well, I never slept at the locks.
No,
because it wasn't too hard finding anchorages along that part.
Okay.
The Kayak Lakes, it got even worse. And then above, getting close to Georgian Bay, it got really, really bad. There's some stretches up there where it's just like a house right next to the next house. You can't hardly walk in between them. So it's tough to find a place to stay, and it's kind of rough to row. It's not a pleasant experience at all, but...
Right. I'm going back to the RowCruiser, just thinking about it because I've looked at it. Have you thought of building, what is that called, a sailing version on top of it? Have you thought of that too?
I've never considered it because, I mean, if I wanted a sailboat, you can buy a dozen great sailboats for
True.
less than the cost of the RowCruiser.
That's true.
And because I really like to have as much space, like if I had full sailing gear in there, then I wouldn't really have space for food and everything. So yeah, I don't think I would ever do that.
Okay. What about the accommodation on it? I've looked at it online. I guess it's a one person. I guess you, like me, I'm not claustrophobic, so I guess that's what you have to be. But you had enough for all your gear in there. It's good. It's good size.
Oh yeah. And I never feel uncomfortable in there. When I cycle, I use a Eureka solo tent, and the RowCruiser is actually a little bit bigger than that.
Oh, is that right?
And it's got a hard top.
I know the Eureka tent. I didn't realize. So that is bigger than that. Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. So you got to Georgian Bay, harder time finding anchorages, really. And then I guess it must have got better as you got into the North Channel, I would think, right?
Yeah, Georgian Bay, it starts to get lower population, and there's some really nice like fjords and channels along there, like channels just wide enough for the RowCruisers to go through, and little places where you can anchor. It's really quite beautiful. And then from there on up to Wawa, not a lot of cottages, and a lot of nice shorelines to row along. It's really good. The only negative for me was I was getting up to Lake Superior in late August, and Lake Superior usually wakes up in September. So there were some days where the waves were big enough that I couldn't really see over the top of them when I was rowing. Or not waves, I should say swells. If they'd been waves, it would have been kind of sketchy.
That must be a little intimidating as you're sitting really right on the water.
Yeah,
right?
It was intimidating, but the boat is amazing. It just bobbed up and down like a cork. And it never had any problems with any of the weather that I dealt with. The only thing is higher up out of the water than a sea kayak. So if the wind is strong, then sometimes you're not going to be able to go where you want to go. You have to plan around the wind.
Yeah, and you probably weight placement of your provisions are probably pretty important, but something in the front. I know the kayak the same way. The front gets away from you in big waves sometimes. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I move stuff up to the front when I'm going upwind, and sometimes I move back a little bit when I'm going downwind.
Yeah. That's great. So then you went to Wawa, and that was your first year, right?
That was my first year. Yep. The only other story about that trip was somewhere around Simcoe, I think it was. I was like anchored just below a waterfall, and I looked up and I saw a head pop up out of the water, and then I saw another head, and then there was a canoe coming down. So I pulled up my anchors and rowed around finding all of their like paddles and life jackets and everything, and got them all set up on their way. So that was amusing.
After that, I think you went back and finished guess the western end of Lake Superior. Did you start in Wawa again and just went west? Is that how you did?
Yeah, that was my last trip this last summer.
Oh, was it? Okay, so in between you went to Parc La Verendrie, I think, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
That's actually a pretty nice place to go with a RowCruiser. I went for 3 weeks, I think. And I mean, it's not a huge park, but I actually didn't see everything. I did go around in circles a little bit, but...
This is the guy that, did from Brockville to Wawa in one summer. So yeah, I guess Verendrie is not that big, right?
Yeah, you could go around in circles a little bit, but it's still really nice. There's lots of exploring to be done, lots of variety in the shore. And there's actually campsites, so you can have access to toilets, and it's more convenient. I think I only set my tent up maybe 2 times in 3 weeks. I usually camped in the boat with the boat like tied up next to a campsite, or sometimes I wasn't at a campsite, which I guess you're not really supposed to do, but I didn't get out of the boat when I did that. I was just anchored, so I can't imagine that would be an issue.
So you mostly slept on your boat generally, don't you?
Oh yeah, I love sleeping on the boat. Is
that right?
Yeah, it's nice.
I love sleeping on a boat too.
Yeah, and with this boat, if you have the hatch up, you can see up to the stars when you're lying down. That's very nice. And you can also look out and see the animals and stuff in the evening, even when you're in the cabin. Oh yeah, and when I was at that park, there was one night that I was sitting in the cabin. A beaver splashed like right beside me, and I got wet because he splashed right beside the boat.
That's really close.
Yeah, my life is complete now. I've been splashed by a beaver. That was pretty awesome.
Usually when they splash, they don't like it's a warning, get out of my neighborhood, right?
Yeah, and at that point, I didn't realize that it was upset at me, really. I was quite far from the nearest beaver house. So, but there was another time on the Lake Superior trip, I got squished into a little place where I was probably only 10 feet maybe from a beaver house. And the beaver came out and headbutted my boat at one point. So he wasn't happy, and I apologized, but I didn't really have a lot of options that night. So that's what it ended up being.
Oh, that's great when you're really in with the nature. That's for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So that's Parc La Verendrie. And then you went back to do Lake Superior afterwards, the western end from Wawa.
Yeah.
So that must be pretty wild too. I've been to Wawa, that area, and there's not much besides Wawa. So after that, I think it's Marathon. It's a long ways up. And
yeah, it's about 150K to Marathon. And I was starting at the beginning of June, so there wasn't a lot of people around.
Right.
And I really did enjoy that. There's a lighthouse halfway up, but other than that, you don't really see anything until you get, I guess, about 30K from the top town that I forgot, the Marathon. And then you start seeing like hiking trail structures and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a good stretch there. Probably the only decent stretch of coastline in North America, I would guess. I don't know. Well, no, not if you go up north, I suppose.
Yeah, there's some people that really go up north. I'm guessing that's what you're going to do one day. What about, I saw sometimes you had cell phone coverage to, tell your loved ones that you're still alive and things like that, right?
I had more coverage on that trip than I expected, but I still took a Zolo, which is sort of like an inReach. It's from a different company.
I've heard of it, right.
Yeah, so I was able to send text messages if I needed to.
Good. That's great. That's a good way to disconnect, so that's...
Yeah. Oh, I loved the solitude. I didn't realize how much I loved solitude until that particular trip last summer. I mean, I've had some of it before, like cycling in Australia. I was kind of in solitude sometimes. And that park, I guess, 3 weeks, I was sort of in solitude. But on this Lake Superior trip, I just loved it.
That's great. That's enjoyable. And you documented that online. So I guess, were you writing a journal when you were traveling a little bit? Because your online documentation is very, very detailed, so that's good.
Yeah, I wasn't updating that live while I was rowing. I was generally nowadays, when I do documentation, I just do a Google Docs with point form every day, and it doesn't get uploaded all the time, of course. And then when I get home, I flesh it out a little bit and add some pictures. And I've always kept journals or documents like my whole life, even that first Europe trip, I had one, but I forgot it on the train. And I have a huge box full of notebooks from all the trips I did with my wife. I switched to Google Docs like once I had a smartphone, when those became a thing, that's when I started doing that.
Hey.
And then mostly for my mom. But the cycle and the rowing ones, I post those online.
Right. Oh, I can relate. Definitely. So what's next? What are you thinking about?
Well, RowCruiser, there's like a Crater Lake.
The one in Quebec, the first one north in Quebec?
Yeah.
The Round Lake?
North of Bay Como, north up there somewhere.
It's way up there.
Yeah, which would be really cool. It would be difficult to access, so I've tried to figure out car access, and it wouldn't be easy.
Right.
I've thought about Lake Winnipeg as well.
Yeah, you gotta like mosquitoes there.
Yeah, and probably even worse, Great Slave Lake is something that
Wow.
I'd kind of like to try and get up there sometime.
Is that the one in Northwest Territories or something like that? Is that the one?
Yeah, I think it's over the border. Yeah,
that's
pretty far
a
west.
great trip. Yeah, definitely a long. At least I mean the RowCruiser is not much to tow, so
yeah, it's easy to tow for sure, even with my beat up old car.
Right.
And I have actually thought about getting a sailboat.
Hey.
I was actually looking at some already this season, but I think I'm going to put that off now for another year, maybe, or more. But yeah, like you were saying, I'm really concerned about being sedentary on a sailboat. So
there's that side. Yeah.
The only thing with the RowCruiser is you can't really bring anybody with you.
Yeah, you'd have to bring one is tenting all the time, right? So that's the other side.
Yeah, or just two RowCruisers, but it's hard enough finding anchorages in a lot of places. So if you had two of them, it'd be even worse.
Yeah, two RowCruisers would be another way. Definitely more trips on the horizon for cruisers. Sounds like so.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Lorne, you probably should even write a book. I mean, a lot of people read this stuff. I think it's fantastic. So it's inspiring, at least for the armchair sailors in winter and so on. So
I'd rather spend more time traveling.
Yeah,
than
I
writing,
get that.
That's all
I
cool.
totally get that. So. If you have any advice for budding cruisers or sailors,
yeah, well, I'd say if you're thinking about doing it, go up to Algonquin Park, rent the gear, and do like a canoe camping trip.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it.
If you like that, then think about starting building or getting the kit or whatever. And if you've never built anything before, I'd say build something smaller first. If you haven't done this before, it could take a long time. Like I've seen people online who started it, and it's like 3 years later, and they haven't finished it.
I know, I've seen that. I was looking at some RowCruisers build, and there's one online that's very detailed, but I think it's been at it for like 4 years.
Yeah, that's quite reasonable to believe. And if you are doing it, when you get to 90% done, you're only about halfway there. So keep that in mind. And the biggest tip that I would have for anybody who is thinking of building one is build it somewhere where it's in the way, like where you're tripping over it every time you go to the kitchen.
Build it in the living room. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll want your space back. So, yeah, actually, honestly, I did build mine in my living room because it was winter and I wanted the temperature control. So I just cleared out my living room and put a plastic barrier up and built in the living room, and it was great. Actually, this apartment has radiant ceiling heat, so it was perfect for curing the epoxy.
Wow. That's brilliant. I love it. I really appreciate your time, and
my pleasure.
Keep us updated on any new adventures.
Yeah, I'll post them. Thank you.
And there you have it. I hope it was as interesting to you as it was interesting to me. In the next episode, we have a YouTube channel called Spear Sailing, Canadian guy that documented his journey on a CL16 from Montreal to Quebec City on the St. Lawrence River. And finally, if it's possible to help support the channel, if you can submit a review, I have 3 free subscriptions to Small Craft Advisor to give away. The first 3 reviews that will be submitted will each get a subscription to Small Craft Advisor. I appreciate the help. Thank you, everybody. Remember, seize your own adventure.